You are very welcome along to another RTÉ Rugby podcast after a weekend of some momentous results both in the URC and at international level. First, we had Munster losing to Zebre for the first time ever on Saturday afternoon, a 42-33 classic in Parma. But then in the early hours of Monday morning, we arguably had even a bigger shock. Ireland beating New Zealand 29-27 in the WXV. Quite possibly the biggest win Irish women's rugby has ever seen when you put everything into context over the last few seasons. I'll be going in depth on that game a little bit later on with Hannah O'Connor. If you want to skip ahead to that, I'll leave the timestamp of it in the episode description here. But for now, Bernard Jackman and Jonny Holland are with me. And fellas, it'd be remiss of us not to start by talking about that result even quickly. I know I said I'd get in depth with Hannah O'Connor later on, just because of where this team have been and where they've come from over the last 18 months. Bernard, this was an absolutely seismic result for, I'd say, most people to wake up to on Monday morning.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really saw it coming. I thought they were visually a lot better against Australia up in Ravenhill a few weeks ago, and this result, like the New Zealand are the current World Cup winners or title holders. Now Wayne Smith came in, for the last year and improved them massively, but and there may be a little bit of a drop off there. But from an Irish point of view, it's like we improved 25, 30 points, it seems. And then having looked back at it, just to control the quality of the basics, which had been very frustrating or had been disappointing in the Six Nations over the last couple of years in particular. Obviously, last year in the WXV3, the quality of opposition was far inferior to what they're playing now, so it was hard to judge them. But yeah, credit to the coaching staff, playing squad, for putting that type of performance together. It was remarkable.
And Jonny, it was something myself and Hannah, I've already recorded the conversation with her, but it's something that we spoke about. Was probably the most impressive element of it was that I think if you had told someone before this game that Ireland were going to win, the assumption would have been it was going to be some sort of a smash and grab, or there might have been a New Zealand red card, or Ireland get up a bit of a lead early on and cling on for dear life in the last 10-15 minutes, or just kind of pull off it's a very low scoring game and they come up with one late score to snatch it. But this was a game where the lead changed hands six times. So Ireland had to deal with a handful of haymakers thrown their way by New Zealand, but kept picking themselves back up and kept coming back for more. And that says a lot about a team rather than having to just build up a lead and cling on.
Yeah, it's impressive as well when you're coaching a side like that and you can see them kind of, you might go behind by a score against what is seen to be a superior opposition, and you kind of think that could be it now. But like, obviously they didn't think that, and the group kept coming back, which is great. But like I saw Dennis Fogarty on a podcast, just a snippet of it, and it was after the win, that evening I think, and he was clearly on a high. He was buzzing from it, and he was just full of praise for the girls. But I think that's a lovely position to be in when you're coaching, that the team take it away from you and you're actually impressed by them yourself. That's there seemed to be that kind of level of performance. But having spoken to Fogs a few times about their when Fogs was with us a lot more last year, I would always ask him about their environment and what's going on there and how he finds it and stuff like that. Like, and they work very hard. They work ferociously hard as a management group, and that's something that was brought in last year really. And I think that shows when you play a game, the basics get better, as Bernard said, and the results aren't a fluke. Like, they're when they played against Australia in Ravenhill, you're kind of going, Australia are a good side, and Ireland, pretty easily beat them. So you're kind of going, oh, what's happening there with Australia? Like, but when you do that to New Zealand again afterwards and you back it up, like, it shows that there's a massive amount of improvement there, and very pleasing result. But you see kind of alignment with the men's rugby game, I suppose, over the last 10 years, where you get big wins like that. It definitely lays the foundations for something bigger coming, like, and that's where they're going now.
Yeah, I suppose that's the important thing to build on this rather than let it stagnate, like what ultimately probably happened 10 years ago when they did beat New Zealand at the Women's Rugby World Cup. As I said, a lot more on that game to come a little bit later on with Hannah O'Connor. Time though to jump ahead to last weekend's URC action, and as I said, some big results over the weekend as well. Um, Obviously, Zebre shocking Munster was a huge one. I do I want to start in the URC roundup though, fellas, with the best of the Irish wins, because Connacht 36-30 winners over the Sharks in Galway. And Jonny, the Sharks 27-7 ahead at halftime. They scored 27 unanswered points in the space of 18 minutes and just kind of, it seems like, blitzed Connacht. Andre Esterhazen was pounding over fellas and they were just scoring tries and picking up 3 pointers off the tee like it was going out of fashion. But then, just incredibly, Connacht settled themselves at halftime, dust themselves down, scored 29 unanswered points, and only a late penalty actually got the Sharks any sort of a point from the game. Just a remarkable 80 minutes all round.
Yeah, and that's actually the game I looked at in the most depth across the weekend. It was a great game to actually pick off, because when I was on Game On the other night and I was talking about the spectrum of Munster's loss being at one end of it and Connacht's win being on the other side of it, like, and then the other two falling somewhere in between, Leinster fairly run of the mill in the end. But like um Connacht had such control over the first 20 minutes, and they obviously scored very early on. They kept putting the ball in behind, and I think their kicking game was quite impressive. They just kind of let the Sharks out of there. I think they took Jason Jenkins out in the line out. They kicked out with a penalty. So the kicking game is a funny one, because if you commit to kicking the ball away, you obviously kick possession away, but you're hoping to put the opposition in a pressurized situation where they give it back to you in a better position, and then you can go and take your points from that. But like, besides the first attack and maul that they scored from, they never really got. They didn't at all get another score in the 20 minutes, and all of a sudden, Sharks just maybe countered that kicking game. Masuku has a bomb of a foot. He put the ball in the air. Cordero, I think, knocked on in a breakdown, and all of a sudden they had their platform. I think there was a penalty from Cian Prendergast, wasn't there? Kind of a blast in the ruck, and he went off his feet. They went into the corner, and then their new signing, Andre Esterhazen, what a man mountain, like. So he just crashed over from a fairly simple dummy maul, and he went over the top of Josh Johanna, didn't he? But I think at half time, like, something must have been said. I don't know what they said, but Cathal Ford was so impressive. I think he was another part of the resurgence, because he shifted in one, didn't he? Like, on commentary they mentioned him going, David Hawkshaw coming on, and I think everyone would have thought he'd go to 10, but I think he stayed in the middle of the field and Cathal Ford went to out half. His left foot is impressive, but that chip over the top, Mac Hansen back into him, he kind of started the kind of resurgence. But everything he did, I thought he was quality. Like, at the start of the game, even when they were behind, and then you add on a bit of physicality from, Josh Murphy, who's returned from his 1 year sabbatical doing his medical degree. Cian Prendergast impressive. Niall Murray in the line out. There's loads of different bits and pieces you can pick off, but the resurgence was class.
And on Cathal Ford, Bernard, it's an interesting one for Pete Wilkins now this week, because Joshua is ruled out. He's following return to play protocol. So there's obviously a decision to be made there between Jack Carty or Cathal Ford. And as Jonny was saying, like, we haven't seen a huge amount of Cathal Ford at out half in the last couple of years. It's been mainly in the centre, but he did come through the system as an out half, made his debut for Connacht as an out half. And I remember being at the sports ground the day of his debut, where they were absolutely thrashed by the Glasgow Warriors. And him, probably only 20, 21 years of age, starting at out half, was probably the only bright spot in the entire game. So he obviously has it in his locker. But it'll be interesting to see what way Pete Wilkins goes this weekend, because obviously Jack Carty hasn't played yet this season. There might be a bit of rust there, whereas Cathal Ford has started these first two games flying it.
Yeah, look, I think Ford has definitely made his case. I think the challenge for Wilkins is, if he doesn't pick Carty, what kind of message that is to him. You've got your club captain.
Ex-club.
Ex-club captain. That's been taken off him. I'm sure he's still part of the leadership group. I think Connacht need to have a Jack Carty on form, over the course of the season, because unfortunately there will be injuries. And I think he deserves a chance to show what he can do as well. So yeah, that'd be a huge call to leave him out and go for Ford. I think Ford is obviously, it's brilliant to have a player of his versatility to be able to either start, move into 10 later on in the game. But I would say that'd be keeping Pete Wilkins up at night. If he doesn't give Jack a chance now, obviously you would say Josh was going to come back into the team. You would think when he comes back from his return to play, and then he could be suddenly 4 or 5 games in, and you haven't given what it has been a talisman for Connacht, and still has, I think, still has lots to offer, an opportunity. So I personally would risk the lack of game time that Jack has had with the fact that he's been there, done that, and he deserves a shot to show what he can do.
What way do you see that, Johnny?
Yeah, the same way. I think Jack has to come back in there. As much as I was talking about Cathal Ford, I think he was class all around the pitch, gathering high balls and everything. Kicking to touch, he didn't get much out of, so maybe that's something, again, you're not doing that normally because you've got an out half on the pitch. But I think Cathal Ford has to be there somewhere. And there's Bundyaki back this week. I think I saw that somewhere. So all of a sudden, I think Jack Carty should go back into 10. And then you've got Piers O'Connor, who's actually playing well and distributing very well. I think he might be the one to take a rest because Bundy and Cathal Ford will take one of those two midfield jerseys and Jack Carty will come back in. That's how I see it happening anyway.
On the overall, I suppose just importance of the win, Bernard. It's an absolutely massive win, even aside from 5 points and whatever, because it was something Pete Wilkins said last week when he was doing his media that we've been down this road a lot of times before with this Connacht team, where particularly last season, where they were putting up a really, really good performance in an Interpro, not necessarily getting the result they wanted. But then the following week they were going out and they were undoing all of that good work and not showing up in a game when they might have been expected to pick off the points. To get that win last weekend, and I suppose the nature of the way they did it is a big statement for them.
Massive, and I think they've identified some of the issues that they had last season, or look to be stronger. Like, I can't remember the exact stat, but when I reviewed Connacht at the end of last season, their conversion rate from kicking to the corner was horrendous. Like, they just didn't capitalize on those opportunities on a regular basis. We're one of the lowest in the league, and 2 maul tries at the weekend is a positive for that. So obviously, John Muldoon will feel a lot happier about himself. The pack will feel a lot more happier, and you need to be able to do that because there's going to be games where Connacht's all singing, all dancing attack won't be able to get them out of trouble. And while you want to have balance to their playing, they're never going to be a 10-man team. A team that plays 10-man rugby, but they need to have that weapon, and I think that was positive. That physicality for the close-in exchanges when they had to go into a pick-and-go game, and then the intercept is a try that comes from their defence, and their stickiness at the breakdown, in the second half really kind of helped them towards that Sharks power game. So I think there was a real nice balance to it, and also, like, it would have been disastrous to lose that because you've realistically come away from Thomond with a loss, even though they got 2 points, and then if they hadn't have come back in the second half, you'd be saying, where are we at? Like, we've lost our first home game of the season. So it was very important. But I think the way they ended up coming back, and the spirit they showed and the impact of the bench will have them, in a really good place mentally, that it's going to be a different season for them.
That variety to the scores, Johnny, as Bernard was talking about, is important as well. And it's something that Pete Wilkins was talking about yesterday, insofar as last week after the game against Munster, most of what we were all talking about was how slick that backline looked and how much they were tearing Munster apart when the game became a little bit fractured. But obviously, to show now this week that they can score and they can execute in a variety of ways, where Dave Heffernan goes over for 2 maul tries, where Oisín Dowling scores after pick and goes and stuff like that, and you still have the bit of magic dust thrown in with Cathal Ford chipping over the top and Mac Hansen playing it back inside to him, like, to show they can kind of go about things a variety of different ways and mix it physically with teams as well, because Graham Rowntree was very, very effusive in his praise about how physical Connacht were last week at Thomond Park.
Yeah, and I think, like, it's important when you're talking about, like, as an attack coach, people will always say to you, we're not, it doesn't look as slick, you're getting maul tries. And, like, when you get maul tries, that's the nuts and bolts of your attack. Like, no one cares.
Maul tries are slick, Johnny.
They are, yeah.
Maul tries are slick.
But
I won't have you back on this podcast if we keep talking like that.
They're so important, though, because, like, when your pack can just front up and get you one, no, like, it helps when your backline can create something as well. And you need to have that kind of give and take from the pack and the backline, that they're helping each other out. Like, and you don't want to be working too hard for your scores at any given time. Like, but if you can do it both ways, I think you're a multiple threat. Because if you do it one way or the other, teams will figure you out as well as you go through the season. Whereas if you have both, it keeps you alive. But when you look back at a season and you see how many points you scored or how many bonus points you got, no one asks how many were a ball try or how many were from the back. So like when you're able to mix it around and teams can't preview as easily, I think it gives you a more potency going forward. And like you said there, the physicality. Cian Prendergast, I was so impressed with him. I know he gave away a penalty being too physical and falling over a breakdown, but like some of the hits he puts in, no one will give him credit for being a big guy. But I think that's something that will aid his chances at international level because he looks like a fella that should get there, but again, it's going to be a challenge for him in the position that he plays with the amount of talent that we bring through in the back row. But the variety to his game, his line out option, he's athletic, and then if he adds that type of physicality to it, like he did last week against the South African side, he's just a player I like watching.
Yeah, and he looks like he's really taken to the captaincy role as well. Last point on Connacht I want to make as well, Bernard. I do want to give a shout out to the front rows because we spoke about Cian Healy last week and his milestone for Leinster, which we might end up talking about a little bit later on as well. But Dennis Buckley hitting 250 games for Connacht last weekend, and the brilliant sight of seeing himself, Dave Heffernan, and Finlay Bealham in a front row with 600 and pushing 670 Connacht appearances between them. They're all above 200. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of experience to have in a starting front row.
Yeah, no, it's exceptional. He looks in great shape. He's someone I don't. My honest, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think he's been capped for Ireland. No, and like
Probably came close to a call up in 2015, but he missed it because he got injured at the end of it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, he's desperately unlucky. I mean, there's been times in his career where he's definitely been in the best loose heads, the best two or three loose heads on form in Ireland. Probably maligned enough around some of the scrummaging technique and can get on the wrong side of referees, but very powerful, both in the scrum and as a ball carrier, and a very good jackal tread as well. And it's great to see him get that milestone. And the way he's playing at the moment, and he has had his injuries, but he looks to be in brilliant condition. And that front row, Heffernan man of the match on Saturday, Finlay obviously. How good he is. If they can keep those three injury free, Connacht can build a team around their front row as much as anything else.
They certainly can. We'll move on to Munster now, because after a thrilling win against Connacht in the opening round, back down to earth in Parma, 42-33, beaten by Zebre, first time Munster have ever lost to the Italian side. They'd been 13 points ahead at half time. And Jonny, like it's the same as last season. A good weekend, a good opening week win against the Sharks to start last season, and then they go over to Benetton and just about come away with a draw, needing a late score. And it's like what we were saying about Connacht earlier on, where there was the fear that all the good work of the previous week gets undone over the course of 80 minutes.
Yeah, there's been a couple of escapes in Italian territory, hasn't there, for many of the provinces. So like it's time that someone was beaten, but like having gone ahead at half time, you would think that any of the provinces would have the kind of mental capacity and the know-how not to do that. So that's, I think, what's very disappointing. There's obviously there's a mental side to this, when you're maybe when you escape in the Connacht game and you fight actually really hard to get back and get your scores, that you just think, it comes easy to you. And I was only thinking a while ago, like if you're Dennis Leamy, like conceding 75 points in your first two games, he's a very good coach. I've seen him in action. We all know what he's about. He takes it very personally. And I was impressed by, an ex-teammate had a negative comment and he just sucked it up and said he's dead right. It's very easy to get a chip in your shoulder and say everyone's wrong, you haven't a clue what we're doing inside here, but he's not like that. He's a very open guy. And he takes it very personally. So that's not good enough. You have to kind of wonder at some stage, like you're going, they haven't taken this on board. And then, if they haven't taken it on board again, you're kind of saying, what are my messages? Because I've obviously created something that's given a laxity in there and you start to really question yourself, but I watched them in the preseason game here against Gloucester and it was the exact same. They were leaking of first phase or around the ruck and, you were wondering, was it preseason on a fast track and a synthetic pitch? But that's not something you want to have in your locker, that a team might just do that to you in a given week. So 75 points in 2 weeks isn't great, especially when you're starting like your foundation defense from the inside. You build everything from the inside out. And then not only that, they're beating on the edge as well. So you're scratching your head going, which one do I tackle this week? Because the tackles, I suppose, figuratively weren't going in. They were leaking gaps everywhere. So it'd be very disappointing for them, especially when they had an experienced enough team out there. It wasn't like they dragged the others over there. They shouldn't be beaten like that.
Yeah, and like as Johnny said, Birch, like 75 points across 2 games. They averaged 17 points conceded in the URC last season.
Yeah.
And through 2 games, they're averaging what? I mean, what's 75 divided by 2? 37 and a half. Like, those numbers aren't sustainable.
No, I think Leamy, he spoke really well this week. I think he said there's things we reference, and being the best defensive team in the URC the last 2 years is something that they can hang their hat on and look to get back towards. So I think that's half the reason it's so surprising, because effectively, this is Dennis's third year, Prendy's third year, Graham's third year, and we would have expected a little bit more consistency in that, and less volatility in that, because it's settled. Whereas obviously when Jacques Dienebar came in last year, we were understanding of defensive errors to a certain extent, because it was obvious they're doing something new. So I don't think they are trying anything new. I think if they were, sorry, they obviously got little wrinkles on it, but I don't think it's a drastic shift, because Dennis would have referenced that. It's just, for whatever reason, players aren't bringing the same intensity or level of concentration as they have been. And look, that happens. They're human at the end of the day. Everyone will jump up and down and be disgusted by it. But at the end of the season, if Munster lift the trophy again or finish top, it'll be forgotten about. It'll be talked about as one of those moments that led them to having a good season. So it's a reaction to that. And that's why I'm fascinated to see this weekend against the Ospreys what that reaction looks like. If it's poor again, then there is an issue. There is an issue, because there will be a lot of soul searching this week. You would expect a massive backlash, and it's not just the tackles out wide, or it's everything. Like, even their pressure on the defensive breakdown in terms of the work of their +1, so they tackle assist, what he isn't doing as much as is doing to actually slow that ball down. And to be fair to Zebre, they had a ball on the plate. The quality of the ruck ball in the last 20 minutes in particular was excellent. But I don't think it was all down to Zebre being a brilliant breakdown team. I think it was just Munster just got lost a little bit in terms of what they need to do off the ball as much as on the ball. So, I'd say it's been a horrible week down there. Unfortunately, that's part of sport. And what coaches want to do is get that wild inconsistencies or wild differences out of the game. And look, it looks like from the outside they got the 5 points against Munster, and as a playing group, they expected to get 5 points in Zebre, without really taking on board the things that Connacht exposed. Well, now they've got 3 games. I think that Gloucester game was. I look back on that. So they've got 3 games now where it's been consistently below where they can expect to be defensively, and they'll go from there. It's not just like that's defense, but there's also areas like the set piece wasn't as good as it needed to be. Some of their attack wasn't as good as it needed to be, even though they racked up plenty of points. Some of their control and inability to look after the ball allowed Zebre to get back in the game. So all the coaches will have had issues to fix this week. And as I said, if you're a betting man, you say they'll respond, and that will be the end of it for the season, and they'll be a lot more consistent. But until they do that, there's a bit of fear around where they're at. So we'll know a lot more Saturday night.
We certainly will, and thankfully for them, they'll have a few internationals available again on Saturday evening. Although there are injuries piling up now as well. Tucker Abrahams and Shane Daly both out this weekend. They're getting scans done. Ruan Quinn is also out. He's following return to play, and Liam Coombs absent as well. But Johnny, one of the things you mentioned around the defence was as well, they were getting caught. They were getting caught inside and outside. So I think we've all known for a while Zebre are a team that, they're a good frisky attack. They like getting the ball wide, and they've shown that on their day they can actually score some great tries against pretty much anyone in the league. Being able to do it over the course of the 80 minutes is the issue for them. But I suppose the problem for Munster was there were a couple of tries in there where players were obviously they had kind of got it into their head so much to watch out for Zebre going wide that you had players folding around the corner of rucks and just not really looking down down by their feet to see what sort of a gap they were leaving at the fringe. And Zebre scored what, two, or it might even have been three tries. I'm just forgetting it here now. But they caused them so much problem just sniping down those fringes.
Yeah, and that's one getting beaten at your pillar or your first defender. You know, like it was two props with Jeremy Lockman and Ollie
Ollie,
Yeager, who both got beaten by the nine there, and that's their primary job. You know, it's literally their primary job in defence. That's the position where you'd want your props to be in and eating anything alive that wants to step in there, like, you know. So that's probably the disappointing part of it. And I think you've mentioned there like mental lapses and a lapse of concentration. It, at the same time, it's a very easy fix. Like, you know, it's not like you're going, geez, we did our best and we've been beaten, because that's a very difficult place to be, and the soul searching really starts then. But when you can pick off very easy things, you can just fix them, or you pick the people that want to fix them, you know, and that's possibly the way to go forward. Like, but there was times as well on the edges where I thought they were numbered up, and normally they just come up and pick that off, and they cut it out, and they didn't. Like, that's again, that's the harder one for me, because, you know, without analyzing it and without seeing all the different angles, obviously, like the one at the first one off the ruck, you can fix fairly handy. The one on the edges, you're kind of going, there's a lot of feel to that, and there's a lot of connections and trust on the outside channels. They're the ones that are more difficult, I think, going into the weekend. But again, going like weekend on weekend, you get to go back to back to back, and you get to fix it fairly straight away. I know if you've got a lot of issues, you want a bit more time, but you actually just want to play again, like, you know. So going in to Cork against the Ospreys, who got a good win last week, didn't they? You know, so getting to play again straight away, you get to just get to work. You know, you can't really dwell on it. You have to leave that, you have to review it and leave it there, preview and go ahead and just fix things. So I think that's the strength in having a couple of games in a row. But yeah, the inside one's probably easier to fix in theory. The outside one's possibly a small bit harder.
yeah. So I think Munster this weekend, and Connacht as well, actually will be hoping for a routine, dull, boring as hell victory. Because the two of those sides are, in fairness, they're giving fans value for money. I was looking at it here. Only Connacht have scored more points than Munster. Connacht have scored 69 points and Munster have scored 68. Munster have conceded the most in the league with 75, and Connacht are next on the list with 65. So if you're going watching Munster Connacht, you're getting your money's worth. But anyway, we'll move on from them. Ulster beaten 35-32 away to the Lions in Johannesburg. They've got the Bulls this weekend in the second leg of their South African tour. Um, Before I talk about the match itself, Bernard, like looking through the emerging Ireland squad, and I suppose looking at the key flashpoints from the game in Johannesburg at the weekend, it does feel like Ulster are probably getting the brunt of this emerging Ireland tour with
Yeah,
Cormac Izuchuku, Harry Sheridan, Scott Wilson. They're probably missing more first team players than probably any of the other provinces. Maybe Connacht might be rivaling with Jack Ainger and Darren Murray and Sean Jansen gone, but Ulster did look like they missed some players badly at the weekend.
yeah, big time. And it's unfortunate for Richie. Look at he got those players to get a bit of game time against Glasgow. They've gone away now. They're starting, or sorry, Sheridan and Izuchuku are starting for Ireland today. And it is important that they get the opportunity, I suppose, to show the Irish coaches what they're about. But just it's the nature of Ulster squad this year is they are going to be very reliant on those youngsters, those homegrown players. And as I said, early on in the year, I think particularly with the budget constraints, he's working on his understanding of those youngsters and having had so much experience working with the under-20s. I think my understanding is they're going to announce Brian O'Connor, the tie head prop from Bedford, next week as a replacement for Marty Moore. I think he's signed, so he'll be joining them to give him a little bit more cover in the front row, ex-Pres Cork, ex-UCC. And he's 25, so he's had that period where he's been learning his trade. He's signed to Gloucester, and then he's been in Bedford for the last year with actually another Cork guy, Sean French, who's playing over there. So he's going to come in next week, and that's what they need to do. They just need to get enough bodies in this year who can grow along with Richie and the coaching staff. Jimmy Duffy obviously has joined as well, and blend in some outside talent like O'Connor, who's like Irish qualified, and then obviously the the fellas like Sheridan and Izuchuku who look like they could go and play for Ireland at senior level. That's how promising they are. So I actually think they've a better chance of beating the Bulls than they had of beating the Lions. Just I think the way Ulster are so they're putting combinations together a little bit loose in their play at the moment, and that fed into the Lions who are kamikaze whereas the Bulls are more structured. The Bulls weren't overly impressive against Edinburgh at the weekend. It's a big ask for Ulster because obviously that forward power the Bulls have, but certainly I think it's a game that they could potentially get something out of.
The in terms of the forward power though, Johnny, like that is where Ulster they're looking a bit light at the moment there. And obviously, as I said, they're missing fellas like Cormac Izuchukwu, Harry Sheridan, and Scott Wilson, who's actually probably more important than he's ever been now, just with the retirement of Marty Moore. All of a sudden, he's probably one of the senior tight heads in the group, and still a very very young man. But giving up 3 maul tries, and at times the Lions kind of walk through them with that maul as well.
Yeah, like that's going to be a challenge for them. But I think like Bernard has said there, like Cormac Izuchukwu and Harry Sheridan, I think they're actually, Cormac Izuchukwu anyway, like would be not out of place in the Irish camp itself and pushing for game time. Never mind the emerging tour. Harry Sheridan, someone I was talking about last year on the podcast. I don't think it's a surprise. I've seen him play in the IL for a while. Like he's a guy that there's a lot of kind of Irish forwards around that younger age. Like they could be pushed into the Irish senior side at any stage, and he's a guy that wouldn't be overly surprising either. So it's massive quality gone on that emerging Ireland tour. Like when you look at the ages of some of the other players that have gone from other provinces, it's not as detrimental. But for Ulster, that they're 2 huge players for them, and Cormac Izuchukwu's kind of power, I suppose. Their dynamism, the two of them, you could do with that this weekend, couldn't you? So like that's something that they will be missing. But it's troubling when you look at their pack. Like we mentioned it earlier. You need to have a pack that can pull you through games, and I'm just not sure Ulster have that at the moment. If the Lions are beating in the mall, other teams are certainly going to beat you in the mall because the Lions tend to, as Bernard said, like they're kamikaze. They flake the ball around. They catch you on the hop. They catch you at altitude. They make you they squeeze your lungs, and they really go for it. I think Munster showed last year that you can squeeze them, with structure, and that's probably an opportunity missed for Ulster to kind of bring a more structured game. But again, like if they get a result against the Bulls or if they come away with points, I think across the league season you spoke about Connacht getting 2 against Munster, very disappointing, but they got 2. Like when you build up those points, eventually there's another couple of wins in you across the full season. Once you're picking up points everywhere you go, whether they're attacking or losing bonus points, you have to get them. So like whatever they come out of this weekend will show success or kind of acceptance of their tour. I think that's the way when you detach yourself from like a result and an opposition and a game. I think it's interesting sometimes to look at where can we pick up points, where can we get them back, and where is it realistic that you're not always going to get them. So picking up as many points this weekend to add to their one last weekend was it. Picking up as many points is very important. To get 2 this weekend and all of a sudden it's nearly a win, like away in South Africa without a couple of players. But I know they'll be looking for more.
Yeah, and staying in the fight like was a big thing at the weekend because at times, Birch, it did look like the game was gonna just get pulled away from them. And in fairness, and they stuck at it. They got back. They got their 4-try bonus point, and they were. I know Richie Murphy was a little bit frustrated afterwards that they couldn't go on and just snatch that second bonus point and get a score at the end. I know Lions kind of ended up getting the last try of the match as well. But as Johnny says, just being able to stay in the fight and pick up points here and there are vital on these tours.
Yeah, huge. I thought they were value for that second bonus point, to be honest. And in fairness, the Lions' last try was probably a bit of a breakaway when Ulster were chasing it. Ulster just got a little bit loose. So I don't know. I think Richie would find it very hard to be overly angry. He said clearly in at the URC launch, look, there's going to be tough days for this group, especially early doors, and that win against Glasgow is massive because it gives them that win at home. And this tour is a little bit of a freebie, really. In terms of they're missing a few players, they're still getting to know each other, and I think he will use it as a team building and a way of strength, I suppose, implementing a little bit stronger what they want to do, how they react to teams when they have momentum, etc., and come back stronger for it. And obviously get some players back from injury and get some of those emerging Ireland players who are going to be crucial for them this year.
Lastly on Ulster, Johnny, Aidan Morgan, early impressions, 2 tries in 2 games. What are we seeing from him in terms of the overall picture, though?
He was kind of an unknown for me coming over, but there's definitely an excitement around his game, isn't there? He can run, he can vary the game. So I think when you look at they lost Billy Burns, and I think that was a massive issue. Well, it's clearly a massive issue.
Yeah.
Like Munster have gotten a gem there in terms of their kind of backup or otherwise to Jack Crowley. They've missed that. No, I still think like someone that structured will be missed, but Aidan Morgan hasn't. I suppose he's done well, and there's definitely excitement around what he can do. But again, you don't want to be the kind of like what we said about Connacht being able to flake things around and get scores. You need to be consistent as well, don't you, and be more structured at times. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes. But just even like bringing up the team sheet there, James McNabney is a guy that I've seen at AIL level
Yeah.
with Armagh. What a monster! He's was he at under 20 level with Richie Murphy at some stage at Hamilton.
So
That's the thing. That's the strength in Richie that he's seen these players at under 20 level and he kind of knows what they're about, so he knows to trust them and he knows what their game is about. But I saw him with Armagh last year, and by God, he is huge. Yeah, big, powerful guy.
Right, we'll keep an eye on him over this season. He might get a bit more game time. Last of the provinces, Leinster 34-6 winners against the Dragons on Friday night. And I'll be honest, Bernard, I was at this one. You were at it as well, actually. I met you at the Aviva Stadium. We've seen a lot of thrilling games across the opening 2 weekends of the URC. Sometimes you just got to put your hands up and say this one was a bit of a dud.
yeah, it was very hard to get into, and the crowd tried their best.
They did their
They
best.
tried their best. And Leinster, with the pre-match activation, all that stuff, tried to get them going. But there was just so many errors from Leinster. There was some physical defence from the Dragons. But yes, I thought Leinster's just inability to get that ball into the 15-meter channel and hurt the Dragons. The Dragons were very narrow and were able to double team Leinster's ball carrier. So it was on to get the ball into space on the outside and soften them up a bit. But twice, Leinster got done for 4 passes. Other times, just the accuracy
double banking,
double banking, the maul. Like it just every time they looked like they were about to pull the trigger, there was an error or a bit of indiscipline. And when you look at a team compared to the team the week before, there was enough changes in it to warrant that or to excuse it. But I suppose we were quite spoilt under Lancaster and under Joe Schmidt. In particular, there's a year and a half in between that where it wasn't the same. But no matter who Leinster picked, effectively the performance was very consistent, very fluid, high levels of accuracy, and just what it wasn't there on Friday night. And the Dragons were certainly better and they were physical, but you would have expected Leinster to be able to put them away a little bit easier. But look, I suppose halfback was worrying for me. I thought the halfbacks didn't have a brilliant game, and that's an area obviously that Leinster with Gibson Park they're 100% sure, but the 10 is a little bit. It's very much up for grabs. And I thought Fintan going off the bench looked very lively. He made some errors, but
yeah,
by God, he brings pace to it. And he may be someone that we see playing a little bit more over the next couple of weeks as Leinster try and see what that depth looks like there. But yeah, Keane getting his becoming Leinster's record player was obviously a special moment for him. But in general, that was a game 80 minutes that we won't get back.
Yeah. And we won't even dwell too much on the performance itself, because I think, to be honest, just next couple of weeks as people come back from international duty, we're going to start to see what Leinster are about, and we're going to get a better gauge of what they're up to this season. On a couple of individuals, though, Johnny, Jack Conan and Max Deegan, both really, really impressive in the back row. On Max Deegan, looks like he has started this season looking like a man who read a lot about himself over the last few months and where his place at Leinster is. And he looks like he's come out this season with a bit of a point to prove.
Point to prove is what came to my mind there. But like, he's such a luxury item. Like, you look at some of the squad that they have, and you just get a guy like Max Deegan. Like, when you're coaching and you lose a couple of players, you're like, oh, who's going to step up for me? Like, and you look to challenge guys. But when you've got Max Deegan at that level of depth, that's ridiculous, So, but like, obviously, Max Deegan doesn't want to be the guy who's relied on after the fact. Like, Scott Penny kind of fell into that role as well. When everyone's away, he'll step up. But I think it's time that, those guys really push on and prove why they stayed. Like, and Max Deegan's doing himself no harm in that sense. Well, and maybe that's the reason sometimes when you have a sticky game, you get guys to step up and get them over the line, and that's massively important for Leinster. But again, it was a 10-6 at half time and 34-6 to finish the game. It's one of those ones you look back on and go, 34-6, like, who's complaining? I know the game might have had issues, and their defense actually was it. I don't remember, was it between 13 and wing, or I think that was a channel that they got caught in a few times,
Yeah.
and Dragons probably themselves would be shooting themselves in the foot a small bit, like that they didn't find that last pass or didn't find the quick breakdown to finish those things off, because I think they had a couple of opportunities themselves. But looking back on a game that you've won 34-6 with a massive amount of frustration or learning, and you learn about guys, you could be in worse places, like, so it's very interesting. Fintan Gunn, I think, is a guy you'll be very happy to see, maybe not so happy to see.
Oh yeah,
playing.
because he's not going to be playing much with Terranure this season, would be my guess.
Yeah, he'll be fairly happy with it because he did a job against us the week before. So he's a fizzy character. He gets around the pitch and he can do a lot of special things. So I think he was someone that was being talked about quite a bit coming out of the back end of last week.
And another player, Bernard, who I thought played really, really well across these opening two matches as well, and has looked really comfortable in the captaincy role, actually, is Jack Conan. And obviously his name has popped up in the last couple of days as well. Reports that Racing 92 were sniffing around him, trying to tempt him over to Paris. What are the Bernard Jackman contacts saying about this move? Is there an agent?
No. So I think
work around here.
My understanding of it is the Racing are looking for an 8.
Yeah.
But their priority is to get an 8 who's GIF. So basically they're quite tight on their foreign player spots. So they're looking for a GIF 8 first, and they'll probably wait till January, February for that. And if that doesn't happen, they may look at a non-GIF 8, which would open up to Jack Conan. Look, Jack Conan is a type player that Lancaster would love. The problem for Racing at the moment is they've made quite a bad start to the season. So will Stewart be the one coaching there next year? That's what people are talking about more in France than recruitment for Racing. They just probably need to get a couple of wins. Obviously lost to Racing, or lost to La Rochelle at home at the weekend, and it was an amazing season last year. So probably just needs to settle in now before they start looking at next year. But my understanding is they're looking for a French qualified GIF first. French qualified 8 first. And that's the way it's gone. If you watch Rogers' recruitment, he's recruiting fellas a year in advance now who are GIF, who are French qualified, and then he makes his foreign players later, because there's so many foreign players available, who want to go to the top 14. So you can be a little bit more choosy around them. But Jack Conan would do brilliantly in the top 14, there's no doubt. And Lancaster could definitely make use of him. It's just I don't know if at the moment that's a priority for Racing.
Yeah, a few Leinster fans will be breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief after hearing you there. That probably wraps it up for the 4 provinces. As I said, Hannah O'Connor coming up in just a couple of moments' time as well. Jonny, you're back on the AIL trail this weekend. Good win at the weekend, and taking on your Munsters at home this weekend.
Yeah, that was an interesting week, but last week was needed. I mean, we were probably a little bit like Connacht in that we lost our opening one away and we won at home. But I think Connacht losing their first one, they probably deserved to win it. We certainly didn't. So it's good to get the first one under the belt and then try and back it up. But the AIL is an interesting league, so it's always difficult.
Certainly is a few interesting results there in the opening weekends. Where are you this weekend, Bernard?
Double header from is it Virgin Park in Cork, is what it's called now.
Virgin Media Park.
Virgin Park.
You're allowed
Virgin Media Park.
You're allowed.
I'm allowed to say Musgrave Park. Yeah, so I'm in Musgrave Park for a double header: Munster Ospreys and Leinster Treacy.
Very good. Well, we look forward to that. They are the 2 live games in RTÉ this weekend. As I said, Benetton taking on Leinster and Munster at home against the Ospreys down in Cork. Fellas, thanks a million for joining us this week on the podcast. And as I say, coming right up now, WXV review on Ireland's brilliant win against New Zealand with Hannah O'Connor. Now then, I am delighted to be joined again this week by former Ireland international Hannah O'Connor, who's here to look back on an seismic Ireland win against New Zealand. Ireland 29, New Zealand 27 in the WXV. Just a second ever Irish women's win against the Black Ferns, 10 years on from their first ever win. And Hannah, before we actually get into the game itself, I mean, looking back through the list of Ireland internationals down the years and big
Mm.
Irish wins, this Irish team has won Six Nations titles. It's won a Grand Slam. It's got to semi-final of a World Cup. Like, this probably does stand alone as the greatest result an Irish women's team has ever had, just considering where they've come from to where they've gone now.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely the journey. Like I was looking at that earlier on today and it came up on some stat sheet. It was like, you do head to head is like before the weekend, it was like played 2, 1-1 each, which is a pretty cool stat. And it's pretty sweeter when you go now, played 3, 2 for Ireland and 1 for New Zealand. It's pretty much it's something that's unheard of. I think it has to go down as probably just the performance and the nature of it was just definitely wasn't out of the blue, but it was one of those days where like it clicked. And like we talked last week about momentum and, riding that wave that momentum brings you and the confidence it brings. And it was every sign of it there on, what was it, Sunday night, early into Monday morning. It was class. Yeah, so delighted for the girls.
We were chatting a little bit off air before we came on here, and I was telling you, obviously, I didn't stay up or get up live to watch it. I saw the headline first thing on Monday morning and hopped straight onto the laptop and had to see this for myself. You were telling me you saw some of it live.
I did, because I was similar to yourself. I was like, I'll catch this now in the morning before I go to work. I'll rewatch a bit of it, like, and get up. And it was pure, like, random. That one of those ones. I rolled over the bed like 4 o'clock in the morning and I was awake and I was like, I'll just check my phone. And then at that stage when I got onto it, it was like 17 all. I was like, oh God. I was like, what's going on here? So then I was like checking. I was like, have I got the right through? So I was flicking up through this. I was reading actually like one of those text updates on like an app, and I was like, wait a second. So like I was so like, am I half asleep here that I'm watching this? So then I had to go into like the stream of it, and I was like, oh my God. So I was fully awake then at that stage. I was like, I felt out of the day done at like 9 o'clock when I eventually rolled around, but it was just unbelievable. Yeah, class. Delighted to have made it up for the second half and get to kind of watch that bit live and the finish of it, and rewatch the rest of it then the next day when I was a bit more awake.
What was the point in it? So you probably tuned in probably either halftime, early second half.
Yeah, just early second half. Yeah.
At what stage in the game did you think, okay, this is on here? There is actually a win here to be had.
I think it was more looking at the girls, like, and seeing how they were. They were chill. They were so chill. And the more it went on, I know Tricky Del McMahon, I heard an interview with her, but they looked every sign of composure. It's the beauty of like, they knew what they were doing. The plan that they had implemented was working. New Zealand didn't have an answer. And just looking at the girls on camera, they looked calm and they looked very assured of what they were doing. And so I was like, this is on here. If they can keep kicking for territory, if they can keep them out, get the rub of the green like you need in those matches for it to work, like to get 2 disallowed tried for New Zealand, to have the likes of Niamh Jones's try, stand on another day, you get given that as an offside behind the ruck or at the ruck, like those little rubs of the green you need to go your way. And then the girls did everything else in between to an absolute T. So yeah, I just felt like it wasn't like they were panicking or freaking out themselves at the thought of this. Like it was on really. Yeah. From that second half when I tuned in, just by their body language and the way they were so composed about everything, it was brilliant to see.
I think the composure is the big thing to really actually take from it, because I think if a very optimistic person last week was predicting that Ireland were going to win, I think it would have been, the logical thinking would have been that this would have been a smash and grab win, or it would have been a win where they catch New Zealand on the hop inside the first 20 minutes and cling on the whole way through, and you just about kind of scrape their way over the line. But this game was tit for tat. It was back and forth. There were 6 lead changes. So on several occasions, they had to deal with a bit of a haymaker that New Zealand were throwing at them, but still each time picked themselves back up, stayed on track and on message with what the obvious plan was for the 80 minutes. And in the end, had to go and chase the game in the last 5 minutes when New Zealand had gone ahead, get that try to ultimately win it. Dan O'Brien stands over and lands the conversion. And then also as well, just have to see out that final scrum, get the ball in and out. There were loads of little moments where they had to really, really stay composed. And for an inexperienced team at that level against the world champions, like that level of composure was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it was. And as you said, like, it was nearly more pleasing and satisfying that it was that nature of a game, that it wasn't a smash and grab, it wasn't a fluke, it wasn't like New Zealand were a weakened team. They were stacked, locked and loaded, ready to go the same way we were. And I think, they came out of the blocks, as you said, they came out of the blocks quick. They were sucker punching, and Ireland had to, kind of soak that up and, put their defensive system into place and trust it. That's the big thing with that system when you're playing like your winger showing high. Everybody has to come up and everybody has to make their hits. And it's really that you can suffocate a team really, really well when you do it. And the girls, to be fair, are doing it really well. And you saw glimpses of it against Australia, where it was really, it's very difficult to play against that kind of a defence that Ireland are implementing when it goes right. And to be fair, the girls have put an absolute ton of work in to get it right. And playing the likes of the calibre of opposition like Australia, and the training sessions that they had, like they had a hit out against the French women last week before that in the run up to that, which definitely helped as well. So all those little pieces, but yeah, it was just a mixture of all that stuff and all those pieces that come together. But as you said, like tit for tat, I think New Zealand, the Black Ferns, underestimated the girls. I think that they probably took it for granted, the challenge that was ahead of them, and maybe had their eyes on what was to come next for them in terms of the England game, that they thought, get past this one and we'll, go from there. Like they didn't seem to have a plan B when, they still tried to run it out of their 22 despite not getting any change off at the girls. Were able to kick for territory, were able to get turnovers. I think we had something like 6 turnovers to 0 turnovers in favour of New Zealand at ruck time. So like that's huge. Like, so I think a mixture of that the girls just backing themselves and the Black Ferns not quite having an answer for it. But yeah, I think the nature of it going back and forth made it even more definitely nervy to watch, but great to be able to get that one over them in that fashion.
Yeah, and I mean, like to win not just a game against New Zealand, but to actually win what was a pretty, like, it was a classic of the game, the way it was going back and forth. But to go back on what you said a couple of minutes ago there around, there was definitely an element of complacency in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And it was something that I kind of highlighted yesterday, because it was something we had, myself and my colleague Michael Glennon had flagged in the office between ourselves last weekend, where he was on New Zealand's kind of pre-match call with their coach Tony Christie, and asked about like who were the danger players on the Irish team to look out for, and curiously it was identifying the 6/8 in the red scrum cap being Aoife Wafer, but not actually referencing her by name, or referencing the out half with the left foot, who was Dana O'Brien. It did come across like at, reading those quotes or seeing the clip, that they hadn't really put in the attention of who are these players. I mean, they'd obviously looked at footage and stuff like that, but that complacency jumped out. I'd be curious to know from your playing experience, would that have been a factor in the Irish changing room? Like kind of like going back to the old days of the
fueling the fire.
Not going to pin an online article up against a wall in a changing room, but are, in a roundabout way to get to my point, are the players aware of what's being said in advance of a game?
To a certain extent you are. And something like that, like, I don't know for sure if they did, but like, had you heard of it, talking about yourself, like as you said, like the red scrum cap, like coming off the back of like numerous, world class performances from Aoife Wafer alone, and knowing what Dana can do with her boot, like it was fairly, dismissive, I suppose, in a way, not to name check people. Like when we're going into a match for prep, like you have a whole board up the week before a match where you have named 1 to 23, and you name, everybody comes and like, you do your analysis on your homework on every single named player, and you do all their traits of what's their strengths, what are their trends, what foot does she step off, what foot does she kick with, does she carry a certain way into contact, all these bits and pieces. Like we would have that thoroughly done on everybody. So for them to kind of have their coach coming out and mentioning people only kind of by a number or by, a distinctive feature rather than what they've kind of done, did kind of suggest that. Now, whether the girls use it as fuel for the fire, like I said to you last week, like, fear the underdog. The girls wouldn't mind that tag at all, and they probably would have relished the opportunity to kind of get under their skin a little bit of having those comments made. I don't know if they did, but like if they did, it just adds a nice bit of a kind of a zing to it. And the girls definitely brought that intensity and that punch with it that caught New Zealand. Definitely didn't catch them napping, because it was a cracker of a game, but I'd say caught them by surprise to a certain extent as to the physicality and the kind of the oomph that Ireland can pack a punch with. So who knows?
Yeah, and in fairness, to counter my own argument, I would say that, you know, what we've seen from Aoife Wafer over the last 12 months,
Yeah.
the performance the other night wasn't in any way a surprise.
No.
It wasn't as if she lifted her game several gears above where she has been in the Six Nations. It was fairly par for the course stuff from what we've seen over her over the last 12 months or so. Um,
Yeah.
on the game itself, then, like there were so many good things, and you mentioned defense a couple of minutes ago as well, and that was something that first round of the Six Nations against France. I know they scored, what was it, 30 odd or 40 odd points in that match, but that was one of the
Yeah.
things coming out of that game that people said there were clear signs of an improvement
Yeah.
in defence, and the work that Declan Danaher had kind of got done in maybe only a couple of months with the squad. Obviously,
Mm.
Declan's moved on now, and Hugh Hogan has come in, and we spoke to him before the WXV, and he said it was very much he wasn't going to be tearing up the play sheet in any way around the defensive work that had been done, and it was just about building the small little bits on top of that. It's clear now what we've seen is that this is a very, very well drilled defensive team that are being really, really aggressive, getting up into teams'
Yeah.
faces, and are consistently performing now at a defensive level.
That's it though, and as I said, like it's like the fact that like it's been invested in now. Like there were signs of, as you said, during Six Nations when we were involved in it, because Dec Danaher had come in, and you could see that there was a difference because we had a system which to work on and like to play with. And as I said, the girls have had that time to implement it, and obviously Hugh Hogan has come in and layered upon that. But it is that understanding that everybody has to know your role in defence, but that hard up mentality that everybody is up, your winger is showing high and that everybody is up, there takes a lot of confidence in that, because your fluidity around the ruck has to be tip top, and then you're looking for those dominant tackles every time. And obviously that's a big thing that there's a focus on each week, that you'd be looking at who's making the most dominant hits from that. But in order for that to work, everybody has to be singing off the same hymn sheet for it to work. And you're relying then on a team, like if New Zealand want to beat that defence, they've got to find a way to go around it, and that's beating your winger who's coming high or go over the top of it. And like they did have a little bit of joy at times, like I think they made like double the amount of meters that Ireland made, which is mad to think that on the scoreline that they weren't any better in terms of that stat if you were to put that down. But it just goes to show that what the girls were doing to, soak that up and whack back. Like as I said, getting 6 turnovers against 0. The girls, as I said last week, they would have had to have that near perfect defensive performance, which they did. Now there was a few obviously errors here and there, which you're going to have in an 80-minute game test match, but like to be able to layer on top of what they did against Australia, bring it to the next level against an opposition like New Zealand, and basically make it very difficult to play against. I know you hear Scott Beeman talk loads about that in the press. We want to be a very difficult team to play against, and that is what he's trying to bring to this Irish team. Make very difficult to play against, very, very difficult to break down, and then take the chances that you can. And by God, did the girls do that with some on the day. So it was great.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the ball, where we're seeing clear improvements then as well, is just the general efficiency of
Yeah.
the kind of the very, very basic stuff, but stuff that has kind of been inconsistent over the last year or so, where like 5 or 8 entries into the 22 against New Zealand yields 5 tries. And
Yeah.
maybe we go back to the 2023 Six Nations where Ireland only scored, was it 2 or 3 tries over the campaign.
Yeah.
The scrum on Monday morning, 100% return from it. The line
Yeah.
out, 13 out of 16. These were areas that had been a little bit hit or miss over the last year or
Yeah.
so. And it just shows you like what you can do and what you can get out of a game when those set pieces are just kind of nailed down.
Yeah, they're key pillars, aren't they? Like, and from chatting to the girls, like even from a visual look at what I was familiar with during Six Nations, what they've brought in there, in terms of the forwards coach and that line out, it's completely different. The speed of it, the efficiency of it is just, it's fluid. It's bang, bang, bang. It's very hard to defend against, because by the time the girls are in, the call is made and they're gone. They're up, gone, whether it's, up and off the top or whether it's down, like the trick plays that they showed that they had. There's a variety there, but it's the speed and the efficiency at which it is to get from kick to touch, from ball to back to play. That's what was impressive, I think, the most. Obviously, the first couple didn't go to plan, but after that, like, I think you were like 6 out of 9 for Niamh Strohs, and Cleena Maloney was, 7 out of 7 for hers, which makes a huge difference. As you said, like, set piece are your pillars. If you can keep amongst it and keep your own game tidy and, disrupt where there's ability to disrupt, well, then you're in a game, like any game of rugby you're in, no matter who the opposition is. And it was, they'll be delighted with that. Dennis Fogarty, as well as the girls, will be especially pleased with the 100% scrum thing. As I said, big love for the front rows at scrum time. They'll have a great they'll have great satisfaction at that as well. But yeah, the line out was probably very pleasing as well, to have a caliber of that opposition and be able to kind of keep yourself. I think it was like 81% retention on their own ball. Was really, really good, really, really pleasing for it. But yeah, it was, I suppose, the key foundations that allowed them to like use Dana's long boot, be able to actually maximise then on the other end of it. You said what's probably been inconsistent over the last few years, but having the likes of those kind of, more than you said about like having a proper defensive coach in there to give you those pillars to allow you to build on it and trust it and have the confidence that everybody trusts it is huge. And they said what they're doing in the scrums has been layer in the last few years with Dennis Fogarty, who's done great work there with the girls, and the kind of the new blood coming in. Evo Dow did brilliantly as well. Obviously, that was her first kind of start in a game of that nature, so I was delighted for her to go well as well. But yeah, it just adds together to, as you said, gives you a fighting chance within any game if you can do that.
Yeah, I might stick on Niamh O'Dowd actually, because she was a player I did want to talk about, because I like it. Monday was it was her 9th cap. So she's been around squads and stuff like that for a little while, but obviously with Linda and Christy Haney having played so much over the last couple of years, like this was the first opportunity we saw her to get, I'd say, like significant minutes.
Yeah.
To really, really get a look. And obviously the scrum and all those basics were locked down as well. But what we also saw was a player that loved to get her hands on the ball. 17 carries and got, I think, 30 plus meters. There was that one brilliant little short little line out as well where she got stopped just short of the try. I think it was actually Aaron King probably scored a phase or two later. Was it as well?
Yeah, I think after that, so it led to it. Yeah.
So that's all down to Niamh O'Dowd's work. I'll always promote the props work in a situation.
Yeah.
Tell us about Niamh, because she's obviously someone you've, I presume, played against when she's with Old Belvedere and you're black, but also played with through Leinster as well. What can you tell us about her? Because she obviously, as I said, she's a player we haven't seen too much at the international level yet.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like for the international scene, people mightn't have seen too much of her, but yeah, absolutely have nothing but the greatest respect for Niamh O'Dowd and what she's done. Like she has been in the background there. She has done her time as the travelling reserve probably throughout the duration of the Six Nations. And before that, like in previous campaigns where she has waited her time, they were a really good cohesive unit there, the front rows and the props together in terms of how they work together and how they benefit each other. It is a real like pack mentality in terms of they're there to fight for positions, but they really do. Herself and Christy Haney would probably be best friends and they would room together despite the fact that they would be fighting for the same position. But Niamh herself, like, yeah, she has bided her time and, you know, plied her trade. She started off, I think, initially as a back rower. So I played with her and against her when she's played at Leinster, I think, you know, a couple of seasons ago with us at back row. So she kind of has that ability to do the same things that a back rower can do in terms of the speed, and she loves a good jackal at a breakdown as well. So she is a pain in the backside to play against. But yeah, what she brings, she's like a Duracell bunny. She just keeps going and going and going. Even at training sessions, she will run to water. She'll be the first one to sprint to water, sprint back to the drill. She will be the first to everything. Like that's just the high octane that she is constantly up there in terms of the output that she gives. So yeah, it's been great to see her kind of be able to put everything that she does on a training pitch into a starting jersey now. And I know Christy, despite being, you know, out with injury herself at the moment, you know, she'll be nothing but thrilled for her to see her get her chance as well, such as the relationship they have. But yeah, she packs a punch to it because she's improved so much in her scrummaging over the last couple of years. And on top of that, and her ability to scrummage, it's like having another back rower on the pitch because of her speed. I said the line speed that she brings is you know, top notch, that she's literally bringing an absolute, you know, a wave of it coming up with her. So, and her hits and everything. And you said her stats there speak for themselves at the weekend. She put in some shift. So it was great for her, including a little yellow card on top of it, which would be, she'll just be delighted that it was for nothing too cynical or anything she'd be getting abused for. So like she'll take the collapsing of them all one that didn't come to too bad an outcome. But yeah, no, delighted for her to get her time.
But very reassuring from a depth point of view as well, because obviously we would have seen like Linda Jugang having to hop around between tight and loose, playing 80 minutes over the course of big games. So even just that in and of itself, having another option there that is well capable of playing a big test match is huge. Then there are the players that we've known plenty about over the last couple of years. Like we've already mentioned Aoife, Brittany Hogan, though, 19 tackles, like just her standard stuff, I think, at this stage as well. It's not often poor Niamh Jones gets dropped back in the tackle in the
second order. I know, yeah.
Niamh only had 14.
14, 14 for Niamh. Like, but this was, do you know what the best thing was about it, Neil? It was when you look at the stats and like you look at the stat sheet of everybody, or when you were looking at the game, it like bar obviously Aoife Wafer, obviously, you know, she's up at that world class level now, but like it was across the board, everybody was consistent. It wasn't like, oh my God, she played absolutely out of her skin, that was what was needed for it to happen. But it was a consistency across the whole park. obviously there was a couple of girls who didn't get off the bench, but everybody who did, like Siobhan McCarthy came off the bench as prop during that yellow card period. I think got 2 turnovers in that period as well to make a real impact. And that's a big emphasis on what they're bringing in terms of the bench. Scott wants you to be able to, bring impact and be able to add to the team when you get your shot. And obviously Siobhan took that, but it was across the board. When you look at the stats, Brittany has been up there consistently for the last number of years. Obviously behind what Wafer is doing, it's hard maybe for it to get seen like that. But again, it's that working as that cohesive unit, that the stats from everybody was tip top, and that's what you need to beat an opposition like the world champions in the Black Ferns. You need everybody to be humming, and within the systems that they're playing, and within the plan that they had, it worked. And like as I said, they were able to, meet New Zealand at the line and push them back. They were able to implement, and we talked about it last week and said that when they get their chances, they have to be able to execute them, and that they did as well. So it was deadly.
And obviously I think we do have to bring up Aoife Wafer again. I know we mentioned her a little bit earlier on, but like as we said, for the last few months, it's been established she's an Irish star. Then it was established, okay, this is a star of the Six Nations.
Yeah.
But at the weekend, it's become fairly obvious now that Aoife Wafer is a proper global talent in women's rugby at the moment, and still just 21 years of age. Like it's a player here, and I'll get to it in a minute as well. There are multiple players in a certain age bracket that a team can be built around for the next 10 years.
Yeah, and that's the exciting part. As I said, Wafer obviously has done incredible things over the last number of months from the Six Nations leading into it. And it's great for her, that she's had this injury-free run, because she has been around for a long time, probably since she's been 18 or made her first cap, and she was very young then. But she's been hampered with injury since then. Even after Six Nations this year, we didn't get her back till the tail end of the Interpros because she just gets unlucky with various injuries. So to see her now go on this run like she did in the Six Nations, she kept herself injury-free, and to be on this, hopefully touch wood will stay injury-free as well. And what she can bring to the team, it's a nice complementing. I suppose in the past you might have found yourself maybe relying heavily on certain people to have big games, as you said. It's not very often that you would have seen Niamh Jones getting kind of matched or beaten in the tackle stats. But again, people kind of rising up to that standard and joining it is great to see that consistency across the board. But Aoife Wafer is in a bit of a world of her own at the moment in terms of what she's bringing. So it's adding huge kind of star power to the team, which is great. And
then just the overall age profile as well. She's one, as I said, of a number in that age bracket. I tallied it up there earlier on of the starting lineup, an average age of just 25. Emer Considine and Adele McMahon, the only two players in there over the age of 30. There was 3 21-year-olds, 2 24-year-olds, 2 25-year-olds, 2 26-year-olds. There's a very, very healthy age bracket there. Players like Aoife Dalton, Enya Breen, Dana, obviously, still only 20 years of age. Aoife is only 21. Who else? We've got Niamh O'Dowd, 24 as well, still in the early stage of her career. It really, really is promising to see the age profile of where these players are breaking through now. And also as well from a wider point, where going back to the Interprovincial Championship, where there were a lot of standout players who aren't in this squad at the moment, people who are part of the extended panel over the summer, who are also in that late teens, early 20s bracket. Throw in then on top of it people like Bevan Parsons, Katie Corrigan, who else? Avian Riley, who's out injured at the moment. There's a very, very healthy age bracket coming in there. Aaron King off the bench as well, another 20, 21-year-old. Yeah, that's the thing. It's a healthy place to be, but it's great that that they're getting these performances with that mixture of kind of the few, as I said, chatting to Emer last night, the oldies on the team. I was like, you've taken that mantle off me. So she's back being probably the oldest, along with Nicole on the squad and Adele McMahon. So like as I said, it's in a really, really healthy place, and it bodes well for the future. Sorry to interrupt, but also as well, even for players in that age bracket and that level of a lot of them still relatively inexperienced of Test rugby, to get a win like this against a team like New Zealand at this stage of their careers. And you know what? It's a mixture of when you're young and you just have no fear, because you don't know any difference. That you want to win the game, and you don't have this happened at X year or whatever before. It's we're going out to win this game, and why wouldn't we kind of attitude, because it's that, I suppose, not the naivety of youth, but it's the pure just freedom of being able to go out and know that you're on the crest of a wave now, that in terms of the back of all the performance that have come and the feel good factor that's there, it's momentum. And momentum is a crazy thing, to garner the confidence, and the confidence, as I know Adele McMahon talked about in an interview she did. She said about the confidence that the squad have in what they're doing and in the systems that they're playing, but also in each other. And that's huge. As I said, to have that confidence
And that will be right through from the 1 to 30 of them that have travelled, or however many of them that have travelled over there, like that have, next person up mentality, that like when someone comes on, that they're able to do that job as well. So yeah, it bodes really well for what's to come. And as you said, to be getting the experience, you play the best to become the best and to see where you're at. We talked about, you want to see, from last week we said, see where you're at, by playing the likes of these oppositions. And so far it looks to be in a pretty healthy place at the moment. So long may it continue.
And finally then, Canada this Saturday. We kind of need to get ourselves back into the mindset. There is another match actually coming up this weekend. Canada Saturday night at the more favourable 11:45 p.m. Irish time kickoff on Saturday night. It'll be easier one for us to stay up and watch. What's it's funny, like trying to get our heads around how to approach this one now. I don't know, would Scott Beeman have had in mind maybe to rotate a team around and try look towards the win against the USA? It's kind of hard to make too many changes off a team like that after the game at the weekend, because you probably just don't want to lose that momentum. You want to keep riding that wave.
Yeah, it's hard to know. God only knows now in terms of selection. I've been on both sides of it, so you wouldn't know what he planned on doing. But yeah, it's funny. Like, as I said, I watched the bits of the Canada and the French match. Like, and Canada had a similar position to us in terms of the momentum and the feel-good factor, because of course a lot of their squad, similar to our squad, have come off the back of the Olympics. But of course they're coming off the back of getting to an Olympic final, getting silver medals, didn't they, with their sevens team? So there's, I think, 5 or so of them in that squad. But watching that match, it was like watching a different France. Like, France seemed really, really lethargic in that first half. Now it turned into a bit of a belter in terms of a high-scoring affair, but Canada were very comfortable in the end, 40-something winners to 20-something, wasn't it, in the end? But it'll be an interesting one to see, I suppose, what the girls do. But like the girls, again, it's the same attitude, as in like they are still, they're the underdogs in this WXV one that nobody expected, I suppose, from obviously looking at the Black Ferns and the likes, that maybe that they were taken for granted. And I suppose there's probably going to be a bit more awareness of who's who with the red scrum cap and the left boot now, I'd say, more than there was before. But yeah, like I think it's hard to know what they'll do in terms of selection. Yeah, as you said, you keep the flow of it. But as I said, being on both sides of that, anything could happen. And the girls will be very much next job mentality, and the fight for jerseys will be up again when they go back to the training pitch during the week. So it'll be an interesting affair, because Canada have now jumped, of course, to second. They've frog leaped New Zealand up to it. So it's another one to try knock off the perch. And sure, the girls will only relish that opportunity to do it again 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, same mentality, I suppose. I've heard Scott Beeman say countless times, I think even since the start of the Six Nations, I think the France game, I think of the Scotland game at the end, the Wales game in the Six Nations, and even last week as well. His line has been, they just want to fire some shots. That's
it. Yeah, and he will echo that a lot. Like, yeah, he will echo that a lot in terms of fire some shots. What can we do? Like, what can we do? And as I said, it's definitely a lot easier going into a video review when you've managed to win a match in such a good fashion, 29, 27, and the things. They'll definitely have their work-ons, and it's very much a grounded approach. They won't be getting carried away with themselves, but they will relish the opportunity to again, layer on what they've done, build on what they've done. Where can we go with this? Like, the sky's the limit for the girls now, that they can keep riding this wave of momentum. So hopefully it'll be the same repeat on Saturday.
Yeah, well, listen, 11:45 p.m. kickoff, as I say, Saturday night Irish time. We will put that one in the diary. Hannah, it's been brilliant chatting to you again this week. Hopefully, we might get you on again next week to look back on another brilliant win. But
hopefully, fingers crossed.
Till then, Hannah, thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers, thanks for having me, Neil.